What's an order? An order is the system that's operating. How do you operate? So, for example, there is a domestic order. We have a constitution and democracy, and that's a system that operates, and that continues on until there's a war, and then there's another system that comes and replaces it. Our system has lasted for a long time. There's also a world order, in other words, a world system, and that world system of operating comes after a war. Why does a war happen? Because conflicting parties of about equal power have a fight, and the dominant power wins, and then they get to set the rules. And the last time that happened was in 1945 because of the end of World War II. So, at the end of World War II, the United States had 80% of the world's money. Gold was money then. It had half the world's economy. It had a dominant military power. And for that reason, because it was the dominant power, New York is where the United Nations is. Washington, D.C. is where the IMF and World Bank, they put it there because it was the American world order. The dollar was the world's reserve currency, and that always happens. Before that, at the end of World War I, there was the Treaty of Versailles, and the winners of the Treaty of Versailles determined how the system was going to work after that. And if you go back in history, repeatedly, there is always a world order. There always happens this way, and it continues. Okay, so how does it work? You end up with that world order, and then you come through a period of peace and prosperity because nobody wants to fight the dominant world power, so that there's peace. And then in that period of time, wars are sort of great equalizers. If they reduce wealth differences, wealth gaps, and so on. And then there's a rebuilding process, and that produces prosperity and peace. Also, nobody wants to go back into the war. Everybody remembers how horrible they are. Before that, these cycles typically can take 100 years. Let's say they can take a lifetime. And then people forget because they weren't the same people. They forget how terrible wars are. After wars, people remember how terrible wars are and they want peace. All of those reasons produces peace and prosperity. And there's also a financial reorganization. But then that peace and prosperity leads naturally to the country that has that having the world's reserve currency. A reserve currency means it's the currency that's accepted. So naturally, the dollar is the world's reserve currency. Before that, it was the British pound during the British Empire. Before that, it was the Dutch guilder. It's the same pattern. And so, and there's peace and prosperity with the world's reserve currency. Now, when you have the world's reserve currency, the rest of the world wants to save, and they save in that currency. And that leads the country who has the world's reserve currency to borrow. It gives them what's called the exorbitant privilege of being able to borrow and print the world's currency. Boy, that's a good thing to have. And then what they do, of course, is as prosperity continues and asset prices go up, like stocks go up and everything does really well, it encourages more borrowing and spending and betting on prosperity. And that begins to have a rise in levels of indebtedness. So you see debt levels rise. And the third thing it does is it creates greater wealth and values gaps. They become greater naturally. The wealth that's built up is distributed unevenly, and those who make a lot of money then begin to have a larger wealth gap, and that creates also an opportunity gap. If we're lucky enough to have the money, we can educate our children well and so on. That gives them an unfair advantage as in relationship to others. And so this wealth gap increases at the same time as levels of indebtedness increase. And then, of course, what happens is the competition increases. The competition increases because when you win and you have the other Germany or Japan or other countries destroyed after the war and there are no other competitors, then it's a dominant position. But over with time, others learn and begin to build up, like China particularly has increased its per capita income and its competitiveness. And so China is a competitor with the United States, but all through that time, it was like the British were competitors with the Dutch and so on. So we see that pattern happen over and over. As that power gap narrows, then conflicts about how things should go increase. And internally, there is a conflict over wealth and wealth gaps And then there's a higher level of indebtedness, which makes for a worse set of circumstances. And that combination of circumstances leads to more conflict and more problems. So traditionally, you see that if you have a lot of levels of debt, the classic way that you see this is, what does a government do when it doesn't have enough money? It's not like they go into the coffers. The coffers are empty. They have no gold. They have not that money. So where do they get the money? They have to take the money from somebody else. That's either through taxes. People get angry when they're taking it away, and there's a big fight over it. So what they usually do is they print money. And through the Roman times, back in Roman times, they had gold coins. They put less gold in the coins. They put other metals in the coins. And inevitably, they print money when they want to spend more. And that, of course, produces the inflation. It devalues the value of money. And you lose buying power. And when that happens, at the same time, there's a large wealth gap, an opportunity gap. That produces a lot of internal conflict of the sort that we're seeing now. You always see populists of the left and populists of the right. What's a populist? A populist is a person who will fight for their side. They are not compromisers, okay? So that you see that you get to the point where there may not be compromise. For example, January 6th is right out of the populist playbook. In other words, fighting for power. It's entirely possible that we will see that neither side in the upcoming elections would accept losing. Okay, and there's a conflict. So you have that populace and that greater extreme of the left and the right. You have more internal conflict, and then as you have the rising power challenging the existing power, you have the world conflict, and then normally that produces a resolution, which happens through wars, because there's no world court that you bring your case to, and then there's a jury who makes a decision. It's typically through conflict. You have the next war, and you do the same thing over and over again. So that, by and large, is the pattern.